They are warming up now on reversing, so let's maybe get in there. The countdown has started. 10 seconds until we are going live with the match. The grand final of Trackmania Grand League Winter 2021 season. Give it up for your two finalists, Pac and CarlJr, facing off here on the first map on reversing in the best of 5 series. First round coming up now on the track. We all know it at this point. It is going to come down to that backwards part in the second lap, or maybe not, as we've seen these two players have the exact same strategy and are able to do it very consistently. CarlJr taking an early lead into this race, little ahead of Pac as they go onto the grass section now, into the technical section. Both of these players are world champions in this track style, drifting around on road corners. It's the main competitive style in Trackmania for years and years, and it's only recently that we've seen more multi-style tracks coming through, but this is something that they know well. The technical sections, both masters of the style, jumping up now into the backwards part, into new territory here. CarlJr had Pac with more speed, but he hits the wall, and this could be the first round for Carl. It is over 1.5 seconds. If Carl can chain this together into a knockout, that's 1 checkpoint, make it 2 with a multi-lap, and this should be the first round to Carl with a knockout here on the third. There you have it, CarlJr with first blood.
Early round score, for CarlJr indeed, due to that small touch on the booster part, which sapped all of the momentum of the Englishman. That yielded CarlJr the advantage needed for a win by KO. As we're moving on to round 2 now, heading into checkpoint number 1. CarlJr might see that as a free round, but it might just be a free warning coming in for Pac here that he needs to actually get his head in now, head into the match. He cannot really afford any slip-ups or any lapse of concentration right now if he wants to actually manage to mount a challenge to the reigning champion.
Yeah, CarlJr is going to punish you for every mistake like that, and he's also going to drive consistently. This is the CarlJr special. As I mentioned, he is just boringly good at Trackmania, making it look so easy, so simple, so effortless all the way through the tournament, and now also in the 1v1 match has yet to show any signs of weakness here, and Pac's going to have to keep up with that Canadian car and also overtake it to get any points in this match. This time, same scenario, he has more speed, he avoids the wall hit this time, and we have a race on our hands. Let's see who can set up best for this 180 turnaround. Looks like Pac just barely avoiding the wall, almost sliding out, but a great save from the Englishman to take the lead into lap number 2, 0.13 ahead of CarlJr here.
That was a close call on the J-turn from Pac right here, going inches away from the wall. This was going to be really close, but at the landing of the second checkpoint, he lost a lot of momentum, allowing Carl to slip through into the lead at the exit of the transfer part. But you can see the gap is still maintaining the fight on a fairly even ground, so it's still anybody's game. But that long clip here was not really what Pac wanted here.
Yeah, and now we're coming up right into the ending, into the backwards part. Both these players are going to go for the same line. Keep in mind, this is going to come right down to the wire as they're only 0.09 of a second between each other. The speed on the grass here will be decisive. Carl landing backwards, sideways to try to build up more speed across the grass, but it's failing him. He is losing ground to Pac. He was running away with it. If he can hit the backwards line, this will be the first round for Pac, and it looks like he has it on grips, under control. Jumping into the finish beautifully with style, and that is 1-1 scoreline here in the grand finals.
1-1 scoreline thanks to a beautiful ending from Pac, managing to keep the grip on the ground, as you highlighted a little bit earlier on in the night with that strategy at the ending, as we're going to be moving on to round number 3 already.
Yeah, and now it is a 1-1 scoreline. You need 4 points here to win the map. So it's a best of 7 on each map and a best of 5 overall. So far, it's still early days. They've traded blows. Let's see who can run away with an advantage in the match right now. Pac off to an early start. He fell behind in the previous round, so this is some good signs from him. CarlJr close to follow though, and dares to push this with a little bit more speed, but that's a very narrow gap that he thread his car through there with that speed to once again climb just a little bit back up in the race. Still within distance here. Pac almost going too wide there, but now should have the speed advantage into this one technical corner that is so hard to get your car through cleanly. Both players getting it really good here. We are onto a fast lap. I think this is a 104 opener if they make it through here. So far, no mistakes from either player. Carl going with a very aggressive approach to the backwards part and could maybe have an awkward angle out of this. Pac A little bit behind, but the setup for the turnaround is much better for Pac and should be able to have more speed than Carl into the second lap. 104 by both players. This is going fiery fast right here. Close to world record pace in this round.
Oh,
and
CarlJr
slips up, and once Pac sees this, will be able to chain together 1, 2 here right after the wall ride, and the third just to follow to make that a knockout win. Pac with a 2-1 scoreline here.
Pac with a 2-1 scoreline thanks to that small bonk on one of the CP pillars, which is extremely treacherous. We've seen that first checkpoint cause some problems in the live rounds, no matter the stage of the season. So yeah, it is definitely another place to look out for, and one of the places where you can have a small slip up and small lapse of concentration and completely wreck your race at this particular moment.
But we also see that some players did opt to not do that jump at all because they didn't want to take the risk here. Both players are doing it. It saves just a little bit of time, but both players have now made 1 mistake each, and Pac winning out that 1 round in raw pace. So they have sort of used up their quota for mistakes already, I think. If they want to win this first map, cannot really afford to crash more often, and CarlJr did pick this map, so definitely on the limit of what he can afford to do here. If he wants to make that first pick worth it for him, he needs to step up here. Great turn by CarlJr to get more speed than Pac across the bubble. Little bit dropping down here though. Looks like Pac could keep more grip as he jump up into the backwards part. Who can keep the best speed here? Oh, it is Pac by far. That is going to be a big gap right there as CarlJr lost a lot of speed in the landing. Can Pac convert this into an even bigger lead across the turnaround? Looks like he can keep the grip, and this is going to be a huge lead for Pac here. 0.37 now ahead of CarlJr, the reigning champion, into the second lap here on reversing.
Second lap on reversing indeed, and yeah, a pretty good first lap for Pac as well, even though Carl did give him a little bit of an easier time thanks to that small loss of momentum in the final part of the map. Now it's going to be up to the Canadian to take up the slack, and the full slow pick into the pole from Carl, and that's going to from Pac, sorry, and that's a win by KO DNF even from the Englishman, who takes the easy way out, and that's going to be 2-2.
Yeah, once again equalizing the scoreline here, so both players now just 1 round away from finalist mode. Whoever wins this next round will move up to map points, the first map of potentially 5 here in the finals. Let's see who gets it here. Once again, going to start off slow, both players driving set lines, trying to stay within their comfort zone and not push anything needlessly here. Pac getting a little less speed, CarlJr catching back up, and they're once again back to even, but this is going to be a lot of speed for Carl to control. He does manage and does push through this turn to set himself up for the downhill here. Better approach, I think, than Pac. Pac defending really nicely here onto the grass. Carl going wide, hitting the wall,
touch.
And Pac going to be able to extend this quite far. Not a 1.5 second lead to get the knockout, but this is going to be just around 1 second here for the Englishman. 0.77, which is something he can work with, but he does need to win this one on pace for now. Has not gotten anything gifted for free. Let's see if he can do the turnaround as they're coming out of the backwards part. Tries to set that up very close to the inside corner, gets it, keeps the grip, goes down, and this is going to be a huge lead for Pac here.
Ooh,
as he opens with a 104.5, and CarlJr's mistake just got all the more costly when Pac is driving world record pace.
Yeah, he's on WR pace thanks to that opening lap of 0.575 from Thomas Cole here on the opening lap of this round. CarlJr, well, currently not looking too hot on paper due to that early mistake. He's down 7/10 on Pac at the moment as we're moving on to the final part of the map right here with a jump into the grass banking. Currently Pac holding a lead of 7/10 with the identity coming up in a few moments. And maybe a bit of a touch on the way in. It might have been perceptible, or it might just be my eyes playing a bit of trickery as we're moving on to the identity, and still 7/10 of an advantage for Pac right here. Now moving on to the U-turn and the reverse part. Nobody's going to go for the J-turn. Pac goes for the risky strategy, gets it beautifully here. 2:05.032, but Carl with the fastest lap, almost dipping below the 1 minute mark on lap 2 with the 1:00.093.
Yeah, 2:05 flat there for Pac. Despite Carl's mistake, that is a very fast pace. Enough to put him into finalist mode. 1 round away here for Pac to strike first against CarlJr in the finals. And this is really what it comes down to. These two players, keep in mind, they have been dominant through the entire regular season, both CarlJr and Pac. They're facing off now, but Pac, who's consistently been sort of the second place player despite the point loss and everything, has sort of been in the second place, but now taking the driver's seat so far in this match. 3-2 though, nothing is decided yet, and CarlJr wants to make it go the distance with a 3-3 scoreline here, as he is 0.10 ahead into the 6th round on this track now. Jumping across the bubble, trying to keep the grip. CarlJr getting the best of that one by a little bit. Jumping up and landing backwards here onto the ramp. Once again, it should be Pac with better speed, as he does that part so elegantly. Really has figured out how to get maximum speed out of the grass onto the ice turnaround. It should be about an equal line here. Both CarlJr and Pac getting it really nice. CarlJr losing a little bit of grip into the second lap. Pac overtaking the lead, and they are going fast here once again.
They're going pretty fast here, and more importantly, they're not giving themselves an inch. Pac forced to release a little bit at the jump into CP2, allowing Carl to slip through into the lead and have a gap of around a 10th, but Pac is still right there with him as they're navigating through the signposts where we saw a full stomping from the Englishman a little bit earlier on that cost him around. Right now, he needs to get that overtake on the Canadian. He needs to move through into the lead to get that wrap win to open the series up. But so far, CarlJr is currently giving him a run for his money and not making life easy for him, so to speak, as we're moving on to the identity right now for the end of the round. End of lap number 2, Pac going a bit higher. Let's actually see over the booster. Oh, Pac touches! Pac touches! He's gifted the map win potentially to Pac right here. Will he go for the reverse strat now that he knows? Maybe he doesn't know. He will go for the reverse strat. He touches the wall. Is he going to be good? Yes, he will actually cross the line, and he will win reversing. It's 1-0 for Pac in this grand final.
Oh my god, the stress that has to go through his head right there as he touches, thinking he may have lost it in the end, but he's able to save it. And there is the 1-0 for M&M Pac. And now we're going into his territory, into the Arctic Split. The second map in the match, picked by Pac, to see who takes map number 2.
Map number 2, indeed. We're going to be waiting for the loading time. There it is. We're moving on to Arctic Split, the map where execution is absolutely paramount, where you cannot afford to make any single mistake. And I don't think, we haven't seen the risky line being taken by the players in the previous rounds. I don't think we're going to be seeing it here, or might we?
I think Pac might have lost gear in the ice here in the beginning, already down to a 0.2 deficit. But you mentioned that risky line, and if you're going to pull out anything out of the hat right now, it could be that one. It does not seem too much, only I think around 500ths of a second from what we've seen. So if anyone dares to go for it, to get those 500ths in each lap, it could be Pac right now, because he is at a deficit, 0.49 already. Really desperation calling so early in the race. Will he go for it? No, he decides to go on the right of that pillar, so not going for the riskiest line on the track. But still, there is the identity, which in and of itself is incredibly risky to drive. Let's follow here as they're going towards it right now. Through the wall ride, down into the grass part, and then the 3 identity jumps. If one of them fail here, it could be an instant knockout win. Both players getting the first jump, though, lining up for the second one here. CarlJr a bit on the inside. Pac hitting, and CarlJr extending his lead right here. This could quickly be a knockout if Carl gets to jump. Let's see here.
He doesn't get it either.
He crashes, and they're 1 for 1 in crashes here. So a very even race. Pac likes to set up this ice slide very wide and then go low, and he could quickly catch back up to Carl here.
It is a dead even race
into the second lap, with CarlJr on the back foot now, though, thanks to Pac's speed. Here we go.
The absolute speed differential from Pac on this ice turn made him so that he moves up into the lead with a gap of 0.2 in favor of him versus CarlJr right now. And it all stemmed from just the leader touching the final pole on the final jump at the end of lap 1. If that had not happened, Pac would have been completely dead in this round, both going for the safe way around the pole and the tree, of course. Currently going for the final part of the map with a wall ride coming up. Pac having a gap of 0.2 to CarlJr, following the chaser right now. Currently sitting in second position. CarlJr trying to get a bit more speed, of going for a higher line on the wall ride. Has paid off a little bit as we move on to the jumps. Perfect jump, but emitter inside line for CarlJr yields him the lead. Second jump from the perspective of Pac right now, who is in the precision of the chaser. Third and final jump coming in. It's going to be close to the line. Who's going to get the better line? Pac touches on the outside, touches the inside of the CP, sorry, and even touches the tree. CarlJr wins the round ahead of Pac due to that small mistake, that small clip on the CP right here due to the inside line. Completely wrecked his race.
So close though, only a few hundreds after all that went down that round. Let's once again pay very close attention here on the ice. If you drop the gear of the car and you don't keep perfect speed, you could quickly lose a lot of ground, but they both get it here. 10.3 for each player, just about is good enough. Now Carl's gonna go out wide here, try to keep the gear, but I think he only lost to Pac here just a little bit, as Pac has more speed across the dirt, and it's going to be 0.12. Uphill drift, they both have such a perfect line. Beautiful execution by both players. And they are going fast in this round. Low 30 on the checkpoint is definitely on pace. Carl barely clipping a little bit. And this might snowball very quickly here for Pac, as Carl might have lower speed or higher speed from that. It looks like he has higher speed, so never mind that. Carl is still in the race, gaining 0.11 back in that segment alone. And now with more speed towards the wall ride, if he could make it less than that, it looks like he's catching up ever so slightly towards the first identity part. First jump through, Pac with a very inside approach, has good time to set up the second one now. Lines it up to the side and it's good. CarlJr following close, only 0.10 of a second. Set in the third and final jump. CarlJr hitting the inside pole, losing a lot of speed, and across the ice here, Pac hits the high speed line. This is a knockout waiting to happen here. He gets the speed he needs, and this should be a knockout win for Pac into the second round of the map to make it a 1-1 scoreline. CarlJr way too far behind, and there it is. It is 1-1 on Arctic Split.
It is indeed 1-1 on Arctic Split, as I'd rather wager not to call the win by KO too early, because we can see mistakes happen like we've seen during the previous round, or we can see someone putting the absolute comeback and keeping himself within the 1.5 second range. That has happened in the final chance before, and it could very well happen in the grand final between these two players, as Pac goes a bit wide. That was a bit of a risky, sketchy landing from that ice part exit, and currently Pac sits 2.5 tenths down from CarlJr into lap number 1.
Yeah, Pac instant deficit here. He had this in the first lap. Seems to be struggling with keeping his gear on the ice there. It is a very precise line to hit. So now finds himself a bit behind CarlJr into the third round here. Tries to build up good speed here. Goes very high. This should be paying off. 0.36 behind, but now maybe with more speed than the Canadian. Although it doesn't look like he's catching up much here. CarlJr had a good line himself, and the difference is just about the same, gets a little bit closer to Carl, but the identity is the most decisive part. One mistake here could be enough to put you behind 1.5 seconds, to put you into knockout zone. So really, these players have to stay focused and patient and try to do the jumps as best as they can. 2 for 2 right now, both getting them. And the last one here, will we have a close race? Looks like we're all in for the second lap here. CarlJr just ahead of Pac across the ice. But look at how Pac sets this up now. Goes very low at the exit of the ice. And this could snowball back. No, he hits the clip a little bit. And CarlJr remains in the lead. But let's see what happens in this second lap.
Still around 2 tenths gained from that ice turn from by Pac over CarlJr. Right now, the Canadian still has a gap of 2 tenths over his fellow competitor. But yeah, Pac can have something to play for in the final part if he manages to get his act together. We saw CarlJr hitting a bit of a clip on the top of the wall ride that we've seen him cross just at the moment. So far, so good though for CarlJr, who's not hit anything so far. Currently heading towards the wall ride, hurtling towards the wall ride, should I say. 0.3 of a second in favor of the reigning champion. Pac clipping a little bit of the blue stuff on the way in, a bit of sideways action. That will cost him a little bit in the grand scheme of things, and a lot of time actually. He lost 0.6 in the space of the wall ride section. First jump cleared for both of the contenders. Second jump coming in. CarlJr will land nicely here. Same for Pac. Third and final jump will be coming in. Will CarlJr falter? He will not, and he will be winning the round to put himself on 2-1 in this map versus Pac with the new fastest lap of 109.159, 220.9 at the end of this round for CarlJr.
Yeah, CarlJr holding strong there, not making any mistakes, the slightest mistake. And Pac gets punished a little bit for his slow start into the round. Was able to fight back despite that, but here he goes into the next round. And is he going to lose it again? No, this time they are neck and neck here into the checkpoint. Great stuff by both players. So let's now follow who can keep the gear here. Looks like CarlJr is going to be able to, and he might extend this now into a little bit of a lead right off the bat. Good speed into the dirt landing, and that is already a 10th in favor of him. CarlJr getting good grip while Pac is jumping off a little bit, and the lead is descending ever so slightly. These are the small differences that do decide the round. These small differentials between the players, between the lines that they're trying to do and the lines that they're actually going to get in the live race. They just have to keep driving regardless and try to make the best of it. Pac here, great line to try to come back. Great approach in the downhill. Look at the speed he has now into the wall ride. This could quickly make it a dead even race onto the identity. Carl holding strong. First jump, here we go. Oh, and Pac almost too much on the inside, but he pushes and he holds it. Second one, not so good.
He touches the booster.
And that could be a knockout win here. Carl getting the third jump, and the multi-lap will make it the knockout win. CarlJr up to map points here on Arctic Split.
Sorry for losing my words here, but I was about to say that he has actually hit the booster pretty hard, and unfortunately that yields the finalist status for CarlJr right now, who could be looking to even the scales and even the series right here on this map. He just needs to win that one round and not let Pac get back onto here, but he managed to keep the gear in the ice turn, and he's looking to be putting the fight on right now.
Yeah, CarlJr, one round to go. Can't afford to lose two more to Pac here, so he does have some room to work with. Can't afford to miss one, and is probably feeling comfortable here to secure this map. The Pac now really on the back foot, has to push it all, has to win 3 in a row to secure his own map pick. Are they going to win each other's map picks here? Pac won on reversing. Can Carl beat out Pac on Arctic Split? Maybe it does not matter too much, as these two are well prepared for anything their opponent has to offer on every map here, it seems. Very close into this round again, but we see CarlJr being able to drive just 0.1 ahead consistently into the first identity part. Usually, though, Pac is able to win it back in the ice after the multi-lap, but can he hold on?
The
Looks
touch.
good! CarlJr misses, and that is over 1.5 seconds, and Pac will make it through. So now he does have a chance to win this 2-second advantage. Does just need to hold this through the ice, get good speed, and is it going to be enough here? It's still one more checkpoint to go, and it should be there. 2.2 on the last checkpoint. Pac wins by a knockout, and this is far from over.
Pac wins by knockout. Is this the lifeline that Pac needed? We're gonna have to wait to find out, but this could be giving him the opportunity to reset a little bit and try to get his head under in the right place as we're moving on to the next round. And oh, actually, it seems CarlJr lists the gear. Yes, indeed, the Canadian has dropped a significant amount of time on the ice, and he's already 3/10 down at the exit of the first checkpoint.
Yeah, and now CarlJr in his last safe finalist attempt finds himself on the back foot. So if CarlJr does not take good advantage of this round, suddenly Pac is just one round away from also winning this map. So CarlJr is quickly losing grips of this. Pac now suddenly with the momentum and with a good chance of winning his own map here after looking so grim at a 3-1 scoreline. This is not impossible, and if there's anyone who could do it here, maybe it is Pac. Half a second lead over CarlJr is not a lot to most players in Trackmania, but when you're Pac, when you are one of the best players consistently on these Trackmania Grand League maps, then maybe that is something you can work with. Here we go with the first identity jump. Both players getting it. Carl having to adapt this line to go wide, to avoid the pull, to avoid crashing. Second one is very good for Pac, very good for Carl. The difference remains 0.5 of a second. Pac almost hitting, but he stays alive, and now with the wide ice approach, could extend this lead. It was 0.41 of a second. Carl is going through with his line, but how much is it going to be at the end here? It looks to be extending here. Geek, we have a 0.6 lead for Pac, who is marching towards his own finalist status here in the lap here on Arctic Split.
It's not over yet. There's still over half the lap to go. Pac could be well on the way to make this a sudden death round next time around for the map win on Arctic Split. He would be looking to actually try to win his own map pick, but yeah, it's not over yet. There's still the identity left to go, and we know everything can happen in this identity, including double mistakes like we've seen in one of the early rounds. But so far, Pac has a gap of 4/10, and you can see he's getting reeled in slowly but surely by CarlJr. But is Carl gonna have enough? Will he run out of time at the end? We're gonna have to wait and see with the identity from the perspective of the chaser right now. First jump coming in. Pac landing nicely here. CarlJr going a bit close, but managing to keep it off the wall. Second jump coming in, going close to the booster again, almost pulling it back, I should say. And now third and final jump, Pac. Should he be able to do it? Yes, he will. And Pac will win the round and move this into a sudden death between himself and Carl Jr. 108.628, the new fastest lap benchmark. A 220.415 at the end of the round for Pac, who moves this into a sudden death.
And what a great race it was. Carl Jr. tried everything he had at the end there, but the start deficit was what cost him that round. Otherwise, it was fast enough. The first lap being a bit slow. What's going to happen here? Pac going out wide to the left, keeps the speed. Carl going on the inside, and they are within 100th as we enter the lap here. So equal starts on the board. Now both players getting the gear, it seems. Both players dropping in, and this is a very, very equal round here. The final round on Arctic Split. Whoever gets this wins the map. Will it be Pac jumping up to a 2-0 scoreline and just being one map away from winning the championship? Or will Carl keep this dream alive for the hat-trick, for winning 3 Trackmania Grand League championships back-to-back? If so, then you should try to win this map right now. It matters a lot for the overall scoreline. Trying to push down this hill with more speed than Pac. The Pac is holding strong into the water. Carl going lower though, and that's going to pay off for him as he makes it an equal race on the 100th. As we go into the first identity jump, Pac failing, and this could be Carl equalizing the match. Going on to the second jump now. Let's follow Carl and see the advantage as it accumulates. 0.81 is the difference. Carl on the third jump does get it. Now where is Pac, and can he recover this? It is a second down towards Carl Jr. He sets up for his ice line, going low and trying to build up speed, but how much is he really going to recover here? Only down to a 0.8, and this is going to be an uphill battle for Pac.
It might take more than a good round for the Englishman to actually catch up to Carl Jr. right now. Carl Jr. has a gap of 0.8 to Pac in second place, thanks to the small touch on the pole at the first jump at the identity. This is going to be really hard. He basically needs to drive out of this bind and also rely maybe a bit on Lady Luck to have him by his side. As we're jumping through, both going for the safe side of the pole. Once again, nobody going for the risky strat in this part of the final. We signed in the final chance, but not in the final. And so far, Carl Jr. is completely unassailable, has an unassailable lead of 0.8 of a second so far. Pac cannot really do anything aside from wait for a mistake to happen potentially from the Canadian. First jump, nicely done. Second jump coming through, going close to the inner booster. And apparently Pac is not going to have anything. He's going to run out of time. He's going to run out of road. And Carl Jr. takes the map win and equalizes the series 1-1. So far, both players have won each other's map picks. And yeah, we're onto an equalizer in this series.
This is maybe going to go the distance now, because we are going on to slalom picked by Carl. It's 1-1. Nothing is decided yet. And we are going to have a very close match on our hands here. Looking forward to seeing slalom now. These two players were the fastest two on slalom in the top 8, both winning rounds here, both being able to qualify. Let's see what they can do when they're up in a head-to-head match. Best of 7 for the map point. And whoever wins this map will just be one map away from the trophy. Here we go on to slalom, one of the most versatile tracks in the entire map pack here. We're going to see first a very, very close beginning, with both players not really being able to make much of a difference happen. And then as we go through the different slalom sections, maybe we'll start to see a lead accumulate in either favor. Here we go in the full speed part. As you can see, incredibly close between the two. Into the grass turn here. Try to go as low as possible and then as far to the left as possible for the speed. Pac their beautiful line to overtake Carl Jr. And into the dirt we go. Here comes the first slalom part. Just want to navigate your car, dance around the gates, go as tight as you can, and then in the ending here, up the slalom road we go. Carl Jr. with maybe just a little bit more speed to make it an even race. And then near the ending, we have this slalom part, the most damning one of them all, the ice downhill, where Pac is in the lead, going up, but he slides out, and Carl Jr. has a great opportunity here. This is maybe not quite within knockout range yet, so Pac has a fighting chance. But Carl Jr. has it in his hands here to try to take the first round on slalom.
Pac still lives to fight for this particular round, but he came oh so close to the disaster. I thought he was going to be sliding off the map as there and then, gifting the win in a round by KO scenario to Carl Jr. But so far, Pac has managed to survive that. Will he be able to survive another round, and will he be able to catch up? No, he clips the inside of the grass part, and that's game over potentially. Let's see the gaps. It is 1.7. The KO is triggering right now. He needs 2 more checkpoints, CarlJr, to get the round win. Let's actually check in on the gaps. 1.88. Next checkpoint is going to be the decider. Let's actually see on the totem on the left-hand side. 1.93. It is the first round for CarlJr in this instance. 1-0.
Yeah, Carl getting the first here on his own map pick, but he is going up against Pac, who has throughout the season been one of the most feared players on slalom, because he is able to do a very fast line consistently. Wasn't able to do it in the first round here, but there is still plenty to play for. Going to 4 points, he has some leeway, he has some room to make mistakes, but if he wants to win, then he has to beat CarlJr, who so far on slalom is looking very, very good here, driving super clean and not making any mistakes. So if Pac ever slips up, Carl is there to scoop up the points. Here we go through the dirt slalom now. Once again, just want to thread the car through those gates. Get a lot of speed here on the reactor booster. Pac going for a lot of speed. Can he control it up the hill? Barely dodging every single gate there. And that will net him the lead by 0.10 of a second as they're coming towards the identity now. The ice downhill slalom. Really got to set this one up good. Pac going wide for speed if he can hold the grip. And he can, so this should be a lead for Pac now. Waiting to happen. CarlJr just behind though. Super close race. Will Pac hit the flag? He avoids it. And that is a great opening lap. A 105.13 by Pac. Carl close behind with a 105.22. And this is far from decided.
Far from decided indeed. This looks to be really going a bit haywire on the exit of the jump for Pac. Managing to keep it off the flag and off the wall on the landing to retain that lead of a 10.5 over CarlJr. This is where he clipped last time around. He manages to avoid the clip by going a bit higher on the line, on the banking. So far, still retaining a 10th advantage over CarlJr, but CarlJr reels him in at the entry to the dirt before the first slalom part. Now moving on to the reactor boost. Is anyone going to go too far down the inside and hit the wall on the ending? We're going to see. So far, so good. Pac maybe a bit less speed at the exit compared to Carl. Yes, indeed, the case. As we're moving on to the grass banking before the identity right here. Jumping on the freewheel. Nice turn coming in. Late turn from Carl. He loses the grip. He's forced to respawn, and that's going to be the round win for Pac now. Let's actually see on the end time what is going to be at the end of this round. A 206.737 and a new fastest lap of 101.605.
206.7. I don't think it mattered that Carl made a mistake. That is just 1300th from the world record run. So Pac there really showing that, Carl, you can fail. It doesn't really matter. I'm still going to go so close to the world record pace here on this track. And you can choose to follow me or not, but Pac gets the point there. When he does not slide off the ice, that is what he's capable of doing. So we're on to a 1-1 scoreline in the match. 1-1 scoreline on the map. These two players are dead even so far in terms of everything. And if you look at this, they are just within 500ths into the third round on slalom. So very, very close match so far, like we could have hoped for. But now let's see who can take the lead of this match. Coming up towards the uphill reactor part. Pac, sorry, clipping the wall. And this is such a long part that he will lose significant time, and it is over the knockout limit. 1 checkpoint, make that 2, and the third one is free here for CarlJr. It is going to be the knockout win. 2-1 for CarlJr and Canada.
2-1 for CarlJr. 2 rounds down, 2 to go to actually get a second map on the board here for CarlJr as we're heading into round number 4. So far, it's been a bit of ping pong between CarlJr and Pac. One round is a win for Carl, 1 round is a win for Pac. I wonder how long this ping pong is going to go on.
Yeah, it's been back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. They're trading blows, and it really is feeling like just a coin flip continuously here, as both players really show what they're capable of, but sometimes they slip up, allowing their opponent to get around for free. Here we go though, into the next round. Pac building up a small lead in the beginning. Biggest lead we've actually seen here, so not small by any means. That is 0.2 of a second that is accumulated this time. He does not fail the turn, but he goes very wide. Now has a very wide line to recover, barely holds it onto the track and stays ahead of CarlJr. Into the grass we go. Good speed by both players. Pac still sustaining that 0.2 lead that he held since the beginning. Up the ice we go. Who's going to get the best turnaround?
He slides off.
who is going to get the turnaround is a better question, as CarlJr here with a 1, 2, and a 3 here gets another knockout win. It's a 3-1 scoreline for CarlJr here, who is now just 1 round away from securing slalom and a 2-1 scoreline.
You can see the red text finalist mode for Carl, who's on the verge of going 1 map up on his opponent and potentially 1 map away from a 3rd straight title in the Grand League.
Yeah, can it be done? It is the greatest of all time so far. Pac really going up against the Titan here, playing good, trying his best, but somehow Carl just keeps going up ahead in these matches, and he's looking for that win. Pac once again on the back foot here, though. He was able to secure a point on the first map, trying here on slalom now to defend himself after losing Arctic Split in a 4-3 scoreline. It's a 3-1 show so far. CarlJr very far up ahead. Pac jumping awkwardly, losing ground here, but Carl hitting the inside grass, which does cost speed, and they're back to even. So both making small mistakes, perhaps feeling the nerves as we're now going up the ice. The turnaround is very important, very vital. Both players getting it, but I think Pac has a little bit more speed here, a better line throughout, and he is going to take over the lead into the second lap. 105.1, 105.2 by Carl. Carl answering back immediately with a better drift, and Pac now is going to try to chase him here, or else CarlJr will win the map.
Still a really close call after the opening lap of this round right here. Now heading into lap number 2, we're seeing still Pac and CarlJr being within each other's gearboxes at the present moment, going onto the grass bank turn before moving onto the jump right here after this drift turn. Moving on to the first slalom, CarlJr retaking the lead from Pac by around 0.06 of a second. Reactor boost coming up. Let's see if there's any mistake from either player. Nope, seems all good, and maybe a bit more speed. Oh, a bit of hang time for CarlJr, but Pac touches on the outside wall, going a bit too wide on the exit, and that could surely give the win for CarlJr right here with the identity coming up right now. The final U-turn. No loss of grip for CarlJr, no, neither for Pac, but it will be too little too late. CarlJr takes the win and will put himself on 2-1 versus Pac, and is now 1 map win away from the title.
CarlJr doing what CarlJr does best, which is winning so close now to that 3rd title in a row.
And one of the players actually winning their map pick, for instance.
For a first, yes, CarlJr winning slalom. We are going on the bicycle picked by Pac, but don't let the pick fool you, because this is also one of CarlJr's best maps that he himself has favored earlier on in the night. Now it is Pac picking it up here to try to equalize the scoreline, to try to go to the decider map, which will be Frozen Fridges, the final map in the match, if Pac is able to win this. But CarlJr now just 4 rounds away from lifting the trophy, metaphorically speaking, in Trackmania Grand League. So here we go. Bicycle! And it's a disaster for Pac, who instantly throws the first round there by driving off the road only 20 seconds in. CarlJr sees the knockout text. It is 1.8 seconds, so maybe not over yet, but he should be able to hold this just barely, 2.2. And there you go. CarlJr holds that knockout win in the first round.
Knockout win on the first round, and again a pretty early first round win, as was the case on the reversing, if I'm not mistaken, as my brain is a little bit too much at full capacity to keep up with what's going on in this grand final. But yeah, indeed, an early round win for CarlJr due to that small touch by Pac. Well, that small touch, that pretty huge rip by Pac that cost him all chances of actually going through. Meanwhile, start of round 2, CarlJr taking the lead before the jump between the trees.
Yeah, and this tree jump has been decisive when you have so many players. When you have 2, and especially of this caliber, it really is something they're both expecting to make, and they do. It's a close race following it, though. The dirt approach is important here. You want to go all the way to the left, then push all the way on the inside on the right, and end up on the left. Both players getting that good. Pac with a little bit better approach in that turn, and look at this. Pac is catching up slowly but surely, trying to inch away at CarlJr's lead, going for a very risky jump. It pays off. Carl having to let off the acceleration just a little bit to save himself there, but it does net Pac the lead here, and if he can push this grass turn, it's even not a small lead. It's 0.3 of a second, which we know on bicycle to be a huge lead here for Pac. Can he extend this now? 0.2, Carl Jr. closing the gap a little bit. Actually closing it a lot here. Carl Jr. not letting Pac get anything for free. And into the second lap, they are just a tenth apart. This drift will be decisive. Both players getting it good. Pac keeping the grip, keeping the speed, keeping the lead here ahead of Carl Jr. 0.2 of a second now into the second lap.
We're going to be going on to the jump between the trees, and Pac loses a little bit and forced to lift a little bit, leaving the gap to around a tenth. Any yep tree? No yep trees so far in the game, both making the jump through the trees nicely here. Going on to the next part with the entry to the dirt going in. They're going to throw their car towards the apex right here, so jump towards the right, then maybe a little bit avoiding the apex a little bit more than we saw in the earlier phases of the final. As we're moving on to the jump now, Pac having an advantage of barely a tenth, Carl going close to the tree, and Pac going a bit closer to the tree than Carl, so still the advantage to the Englishman, but for how long? The identity is going to come up in a few seconds.
Yeah, Pac still ahead, but look at this, it's so close. Carl Jr. just a few hundredths behind, and if he gets this, he could go up to just 2 rounds remaining. It's going to come right down to the last turnaround. Carl going for a little bit more speed than Pac, right on the finish straight. Carl is behind. Pac holds by just 1/100th of a second. I think he can breathe a little bit easier there. Great round by both, 2:18.93, but Pac gets a point on the board and holds off Carl Jr.'s win just a little bit longer. Needs 3 more rounds here to put himself and the match into the decider final map.
Moving on to the start of the next round now. It was tooth and nail up until the final point, the final U-turn in this particular instance, as CarlJr and Pac are making the start pretty nicely here. 1/10 in favor of the Canadian as we move through the trees and onto the side turn they go. It is still solely in front of M&M Gaming.
Yeah, just a little bit ahead here. Carl Jr., it seems to be a common pattern, but Pac is able to find a little bit of time here usually by just daring to go more in, daring to turn a little bit earlier here to try to make up that difference. Carl Jr. now in more speed though, so Pac is not going to get any closer. Has to try to risk the jump to get a small advantage, and he does land a little bit earlier, so it's going to stay level for now. Into the grass we go. The lower you go through this checkpoint, the better. Carl Jr. with a great approach. Pac close to follow, 0.2 of a second. They turn around the opposite ways here, and they shoot back through the checkpoint. Carl Jr. extending here on the ice, gaining a tenth there, more than we usually see gained, and I think it's even more here. No, it is less. Just high speed, making for that difference. Pac about to hit the wall, makes a good save, stays alive, stays within 0.2 of a second, and it's still so close between these two. What a match we have on our hands here into the second lap on bicycle.
Yeah, Carl Jr. also went a little bit close to the wall at the exit of the freewheel turns at the start of lap number 2, but managed to keep it up. But Pac gets the slowdown. Is that going to be enough for a round by KO? We're going to have to wait and see. Yeah, it might be enough. 2.1 seconds. It will be a round win by KO in favor of CJR right now, who's going to be on 2-1 and just 2 rounds away from getting the title and keeping the title rather for himself.
Carl Jr. now on the march. He knows he's getting closer, and he has the advantage here on the 4th map in the match on bicycle. That was picked by Pac, but it is one of his best maps. Can he close this out now? Pac surely feeling the pressure here, going up against Carl Jr., knowing he's so close to losing it all here. These 2 rounds will have to be perfect from Pac to try to make it up to finals mode himself. He just 1 away from taking the trophy. Oh, Pac going so close to the wall, really almost losing it there and again in the very first turn from the map, but he stays in it. So this time he once again has dropped the deficit to Carl Jr., this time being 0.15 of a second. But he knows that he can gain a little bit in the dirt part if he executes this beautifully. Tries to push for speed here, goes into it, sends it all, and he is getting closer. That is a great approach. He is actually making this difference back to almost nothing. Carl Jr. once again with more speed here though, and we're jumping towards the checkpoint. This time Carl has it really good. Pac's getting nothing for free here. And Carl is usually better in the identity, in the ice turnarounds. Pac might be far on the back foot here as we enter the second lap. Let's see how he holds up against Carl Jr. now in one of the most decisive rounds. He really has to win this, or else it is match point for Carl Jr. And he's losing ground slowly on the ice turnarounds here. That could be good though, a lot of speed here towards the multi-lap. And he is keeping up. This turn is important, but he crashes, he falters. He has to respawn far behind. and CarlJr will get 1. He will get 2 here, and the 3rd checkpoint is just around the corner. This is match point for CarlJr in the Trackmania Grand League Finals.
Thomas Cole is cracking under pressure, ladies and gentlemen. The man who was the hot favorite to take the challenge to the reigning champion is completely falling apart on bicycle. And now it's all in CarlJr's hands. He has 2 Joker rounds potentially before he has a final in his hands with Pac. He can try to go for potentially another push. He can afford to make maybe 1 mistake at most, but he's still nothing over yet. He's in there till the fat lady sings.
Yeah, CarlJr now just 1 round away. Both players surely feeling the pressure. They know how much this means. They played for the entire season for months, practicing these tracks, knowing it comes down to this final 1v1. And Pac, has he gotten a no drift? He has. He's on the back foot. CarlJr is going up to a ½ second lead here into the most important round on bicycle, the finalist round. He has this lead. He sees the splits. He probably knows it, but he jumps hard to the left, still manages to stay on the road, and it has diminished to a 0.4 advantage. Pac now has to go all in. He knows that he cannot afford to lose this round, and CarlJr is not slowing down. Pac, though, gaining slowly, gaining a 10th here and there. The ice turnarounds come through. CarlJr still ahead. 0.29 now. Let's follow the splits. What is it going to be? 0.35 here. On the next one, CarlJr still ahead. Pac getting good speed, but he cannot afford to mess up this turn. He failed it last time. Does Pac hold here? He stays alive in the race. CarlJr just 0.34 behind, and as we're going into the second lap of bicycle, it could be decided here. CarlJr is in the lead on finalist mode.
Pac has to take up the slack now. He's around 4/10 down. He can't afford to make any mistakes. He has to push. He has to make the push to keep the dream alive for that Grand League title. He knows he's capable of that, but so far the mental strength isn't there for the Englishman. He's managing to catch up, though, in this round compared to the Canadian. He's down to a 1/10 of a second behind the leader as we're heading towards the final stage of this round. Coming up to the jump. Who's going to get the better lineup? Let's actually see. Pac takes the tree, and that is it! Ladies and gentlemen, you can now tell CarlJr to add 3-time Grand League champion in his resume, as he will get the round win by KO and become the 3-time champion of the Grand League for the 3rd consecutive time he keeps his title.
Just insane how CarlJr wins for the 3rd time in a row, winning back-to-back, proving that he truly is the Trackmania greatest of all time. He is your Trackmania Grand League Winter 2021 champion.
Well,
GG's.
GG.